The autumn air was crisp and golden as the trees surrounding the Mountain View Addiction Recovery Center in Colorado displayed their full October splendor. It was 2018, and the facility, nestled in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, had become renowned for its innovative approach to addiction treatment that incorporated music therapy alongside traditional counseling methods. The center's director, Dr. Sarah Martinez, had extended a special invitation to Ozzy Osbourne to visit during National Recovery Month, hoping that his presence might inspire the residents who were fighting their own battles with substance abuse. At 69, Ozzy had been sober for over a decade, though the journey had been anything but smooth. His own struggles with alcohol and drugs had been well documented and highly public, making him both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope for those who felt their addictions were insurmountable. The tremor in his hands from Parkinson's disease was more pronounced now, and his movements were slower, but his commitment to helping others in recovery had only grown stronger with age. The visit had been arranged quietly, without media fanfare or publicity. This wasn't about promoting an album or generating headlines. It was about one person in recovery connecting with others who were walking the same difficult path. Dr. Martinez had specifically requested that Ozzy participate in one of their weekly testimony sessions, where residents shared their stories of addiction, recovery, and hope with the group. If you're enjoying this incredible story, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. It helps us bring you more amazing moments of human connection and recovery. The main conference room of the facility had been arranged in a large circle, with about 30 residents seated alongside several counselors and staff members. The atmosphere was warm but serious. These sessions were sacred spaces where people shared their deepest struggles and most profound hopes. Ozzy sat in the circle like any other participant, wearing simple black jeans and a button-down shirt, his famous cross necklace visible at his throat. Dr. Martinez opened the session by introducing Ozzy not as a rock star, but as a fellow traveler on the road to recovery who has graciously agreed to share this time with us. The residents, who ranged in age from their early 20s to their 60s, looked at him with a mixture of recognition, curiosity, and respect. Many of them had grown up listening to his music, and some had even used drugs while listening to his songs, a fact that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "I want to start by saying that I'm not here as an expert or a teacher," Ozzy began, his Birmingham accent still strong after decades in America. "I'm here as someone who's made a lot of mistakes, hurt a lot of people, and somehow found a way to make things right. If my being here helps even one person believe that recovery is possible, then it's worth it." The first few testimonies were powerful but familiar in their themes. Childhood trauma leading to substance use, the progressive loss of jobs and relationships, the moment of hitting rock bottom, and the difficult but rewarding journey of getting clean. Ozzy listened intently to each story, offering nods of understanding and occasional words of encouragement. His own experience with addiction allowed him to connect with details that others might miss. The shame, the self-loathing, the way addiction isolates you from everyone you love. Then Maria Fernandez raised her hand. She was a 34-year-old mother of two who had been at the facility for 6 weeks, working to overcome a heroin addiction that had cost her custody of her children and nearly her life. What made her story different wasn't the addiction itself, but the specific role that Ozzy's music had played in both her downfall and her recovery. "Mr. Osbourne," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "I need to tell you something, and I don't know if it's going to make you feel good or terrible about your music." Ozzy leaned forward slightly, giving her his full attention. "Tell me whatever you need to tell me, love." Maria took a deep breath and began to share her story. She had grown up in a chaotic household where her father was an alcoholic and her mother struggled with mental illness. Music became her escape, and Black Sabbath's dark themes resonated with the dysfunction she lived with daily. As a teenager, she began associating the band's music with her own experimentation with drugs and alcohol. "Your songs became the soundtrack to my using," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "When I was high, I felt like I understood what you were singing about, the darkness, the pain, the feeling of being lost. I thought drugs and alcohol were helping me connect with something deeper, something real." Ozzy's expression grew increasingly serious as he realized where this was going. His worst fear as an artist had always been that his music might encourage the very behaviors he had struggled to overcome in his own life. "I used for 15 years, Maria continued. Started with alcohol and marijuana when I was 14, moved to cocaine in college, and finally heroin when I couldn't afford cocaine anymore. Every time I got high, I put on your music. It became this ritual, drugs and Black Sabbath, like they went together." The room was completely silent now, everyone sensing the weight of what Maria was sharing. Ozzy's hands were clasped tightly in his lap, and his eyes were beginning to glisten with unshed tears. "I lost everything," Maria said, her voice becoming stronger even as tears began to flow down her cheeks. "My job, my apartment, my relationship with my parents. But the worst part was when Child Protective Services took my kids. Sarah is 8 now, and Michael is 6, and they've been in foster care for 2 years because of my addiction." She paused to compose herself, and the silence in the room was so complete that the only sound was the soft hum of the building's heating system. 6 months ago, I overdosed. I was alone in a motel room, and I had injected more heroin than ever before. I was listening to your song about paranoia, and as I felt the drug hitting my system, I realized I was dying. I could feel my breathing slowing down, my heart rate dropping, and I knew this was it. Ozzy was openly crying now, tears streaming down his weathered face as he listened to this woman describe how his music had been present during what might have been her final moments. "But here's the thing," Maria said, her voice suddenly gaining strength. "As I was lying there dying, the lyrics to that song weren't about celebrating drugs or darkness anymore. They were about warning me. They were about what happens when you lose control, when paranoia takes over, when you can't trust your own mind anymore." She looked directly at Ozzy, her eyes bright with tears, but also with something that looked like gratitude. "I heard your voice singing about madness and losing control, and for the first time in 15 years, I really understood what you were warning me about. The song wasn't telling me to use drugs, it was telling me what drugs would do to me. It was a warning I had been too high to hear for all those years." The shift in the room's energy was palpable. What had started as a story about music enabling addiction was transforming into something entirely different. "Somehow, I managed to call 911 before I lost consciousness," Maria continued. "The paramedics found me just in time. When I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, the first thing I remembered wasn't the high or the overdose. It was finally understanding what your songs were really about." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, battered notebook. "I've been clean for 6 months now, and I've been writing down every insight I've had about your lyrics. When I listen to your music now, in recovery, I hear things I never heard before. I hear someone who's been through darkness and found a way out. I hear warnings about the things that destroy us. I hear hope for people who think they're beyond redemption." Ozzy was now sobbing openly, his shoulders shaking with the weight of emotions he clearly hadn't expected to feel. The other residents watched in amazement as this legendary figure, someone they had perhaps seen as larger than life, revealed his profound humanity. "Mr. Osbourne," Maria said gently, "I wanted you to know that your music didn't cause my addiction. My addiction caused me to misunderstand your music, but your music, the real meaning of it, is part of what's helping me stay clean now." She opened her notebook and read from one of her entries. "Recovery is like finally hearing the song the way it was meant to be heard. When you're using, you only hear the darkness. When you're clean, you hear the light that was always there, hidden in the darkness." The room erupted in spontaneous applause, but Ozzy couldn't speak yet. He sat with his head in his hands, overwhelmed by the complexity of what he had just heard. Here was someone who had nearly died while listening to his music, but who had also found salvation in finally understanding what that music was truly about. When the applause died down, Dr. Martinez gently asked if Ozzy would like to respond. He looked up, his eyes red with tears, and struggled to find words adequate to the moment. "Maria," he finally said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "in 50 years of making music, no one has ever given me a greater gift than what you just shared." He paused, gathering his thoughts and his composure. "You're absolutely right that music can be misunderstood, especially when we're not in a place to hear it clearly. I wrote those songs from my own darkness, my own struggles with mental health and addiction. They were my way of trying to make sense of experiences that felt incomprehensible." Ozzy stood up slowly, his movement drawing the attention of everyone in the circle. But here's what you've helped me understand, Maria. Those songs weren't just about my darkness. They were about finding light in that darkness. They were about survival, about refusing to give up even when everything seems hopeless. And if you can hear that message now, in your recovery, then maybe those songs served their purpose after all. He walked over to where Maria sat and knelt down beside her chair, a gesture that surprised everyone in the room with its humility and intimacy. "I want you to know something," he said, speaking directly to her but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your story, your real story, not the addiction, but the recovery. That's what rock and roll is supposed to be about. It's about taking the worst things that happen to us and transforming them into something that can help other people." Maria was crying again, but these were tears of relief and gratitude rather than pain. "You said my music is helping you stay clean," Ozzy continued. "Well, your story is going to help me remember why I make music in the first place. It's not about fame or money or even artistic expression. It's about connection. It's about one broken person reaching out to other broken people and saying, 'You're not alone. Recovery is possible. There's hope, even in the darkest places.'" He returned to his seat, but the energy in the room had completely transformed. What had begun as a potentially devastating revelation about music's role in addiction had become a powerful testimony to the possibility of redemption and the importance of understanding art in the context of healing rather than harm. "I want to say something to everyone here," Ozzy announced, addressing the entire group. Maria's story reminds us that recovery isn't just about getting clean. It's about learning to see the world differently. It's about discovering that the things we thought were destroying us might actually contain the seeds of our salvation. Dr. Martinez, who had been quietly observing this extraordinary exchange, asked if there were others who wanted to share how music had played a role in either their addiction or their recovery. What followed was an outpouring of stories that revealed the complex relationship between art, emotion, and healing. Several residents talked about how certain songs had been associated with their using, while others described how different music had become important to their recovery process. The common thread was that music, like recovery itself, was about transformation, taking raw emotion and turning it into something that could be shared and understood. A 28-year-old man named David shared how listening to acoustic versions of metal songs had helped him process anger without acting destructively. A 45-year-old woman named Jennifer talked about how writing her own lyrics about recovery had become a form of therapy that complemented her traditional counseling. An elderly man named Robert described how returning to the classical music of his youth had helped him reconnect with the person he was before addiction took over his life. Through it all, Ozzy listened with the intensity of someone who was learning as much as he was teaching. It became clear that this wasn't just a visit from a celebrity to inspire people in recovery. It was a mutual exchange of wisdom between people who shared the common experience of fighting for their lives against forces that seemed stronger than themselves. As the session began to wind down, Maria raised her hand one more time. "Mr. Osbourne, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think you'll keep making music now that you're older and dealing with health issues?" Ozzy considered the question seriously. "I honestly don't know how much longer I'll be able to perform or record. Parkinson's is making it harder, and I'm not getting any younger. But today, listening to all of you, I realized that whether I make new music or not isn't the most important thing." He looked around the circle at the faces of people who had shared their deepest struggles and hopes. "The most important thing is that the music I've already made continues to mean something to people who need it. And not just entertainment, I mean really means something. If songs I wrote during my own darkest periods can help someone like Maria find light in their darkness, then every mistake I made, every terrible thing I did while I was using, every moment of pain and confusion, it was all worth it. But I will say this," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "As long as I'm able to speak, as long as I'm able to connect with people, I want to keep having conversations like this one. Because this," he gestured around the circle, "this is what music is supposed to do. It's supposed to help us understand that we're not alone, that our struggles matter, and that change is possible." The session officially ended, but nobody moved to leave. Instead, several small conversations began as residents approached Ozzy to share personal thanks or ask questions about his own recovery journey. He spoke with each person individually, offering encouragement and sharing insights from his own experience. Maria was among the last to approach him. "Thank you," she said simply, "for your music, for coming here today, and for helping me understand that recovery isn't about forgetting your past, it's about reinterpreting it." "Thank you," Ozzy replied, "for reminding me that the most important audience for any artist isn't the biggest one, it's the one that needs the message most." As Ozzy prepared to leave the facility that evening, Dr. Martinez pulled him aside for a private conversation. "That was extraordinary," she said. "In 20 years of running recovery programs, I've never seen anything quite like what happened in there today." "It was Maria," Ozzy replied. "She did something I've never experienced before. She showed me how someone could completely misunderstand my music for years, and then, in recovery, suddenly hear what I was really trying to say. It was like watching someone learn a new language. I think what happened today was bigger than just one person's story," Dr. Martinez observed. "I think you demonstrated something important about the role that art can play in recovery. When people are using, they often interpret everything through the lens of their addiction. But in recovery, they can begin to hear and see things as they really are." Ozzy nodded thoughtfully. "Maria taught me that my responsibility as an artist isn't just to create something meaningful. It's to trust that people will eventually find their way to the real meaning, even if it takes them years." The impact of that day extended far beyond the Mountain View facility. Dr. Martinez began incorporating music interpretation sessions into the center's regular programming, helping residents explore how their relationship with various forms of art had changed as they progressed in recovery. Maria continued her own recovery journey, eventually regaining custody of her children and becoming a peer counselor for other mothers struggling with addiction. She often shared her story at recovery conferences, emphasizing the importance of reinterpreting past experiences through the lens of health rather than illness. Ozzy, meanwhile, began making regular visits to recovery facilities across the country, not as a celebrity guest, but as a fellow person in recovery. These visits were never publicized, but word spread through recovery communities about the rock star who was using his own experience to help others find hope. He also began working with Dr. Martinez and other addiction specialists to develop educational materials about the relationship between music, emotion, and recovery. The program they created, called Hearing with New Ears, helped people in recovery explore how their relationship with music and other forms of art evolved as they healed. 2 years later, Maria sent Ozzy a letter along with a photo of herself with her children at her daughter's school graduation. The letter read, in part, "Sarah asked me to tell her about the man who helped Mommy get better. I told her about someone who made music that helped me understand that even when you're lost in the dark, there's always a path back to the light. Thank you for showing me that recovery isn't just about stopping drugs, it's about learning to hear beauty again." The photo showed Maria and her children smiling in front of a banner that read, "Congratulations, graduates." Sarah was holding a certificate, and both children were beaming with pride. On the back of the photo, Maria had written, "This is what recovery looks like. This is what hope sounds like when you finally learn to hear it." When interviewers asked Ozzy about his most meaningful career moments in later years, he would often mention not a particular concert or album, but that afternoon in Colorado, when a woman named Maria taught him that the most important thing about music isn't how it's heard the first time, but how it can be heard differently by someone who has learned to listen with a heart that's open to healing. That day, he would say, "I learned that the best music doesn't just reflect who we are, it reflects who we can become. And sometimes the most profound gift an artist can receive is learning that their work helped someone find their way home to themselves." Thank you for reading this incredible story about the power of music to heal and transform lives. If it touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. It helps us continue sharing stories that remind us of the importance of hope, recovery, and the unexpected ways that art can help us find meaning in our darkest moments.